Hi, everyone. I'm Dave Koji, and welcome to the Pickleball Lounge, where I speak to influential members of the pickleball community about their involvement and experience on and off the pickleball court. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Australia Pickleball for sponsoring this episode. Head over to australiapickleball.com for their innovative paddles and gear. Today's guest is a very special guest and a very great friend of the show, of the channel, is Connor Garnett. So Connor is originally from Bellevue, Washington, but now resides in Southern California. Connor started playing racket sports young as he played tennis, so went on to play high school where he was undefeated and eventually went on to play Division I tennis at Santa Clara University. At Santa Clara University, he won the Sportsmanship Award for all athletes in the 12 West Coast Conference schools during his sophomore year and emerged as the winner of the Washington State Open. When Connor's not on the pickleball courts, he spends his time in investment banking and other hobbies as well. Actually, I want to talk about investment banking. Connor, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be on here and looking forward to it.
Thank you. Now, the first question out of the gate, Connor, maybe an easier one and maybe one that you might be expecting, but tell us about your first experience with pickleball. How did you get started into the game of pickleball?
Yeah, so it was at Bonita Canyon Park for those who are familiar with their Orange County geography. But I was playing there and was playing a little bit of doubles. One of my friends, she got me out there and was convinced me to go out and play. And I was like, oh, this is just like a smaller tennis. I'm not gonna have any fun. And so we started playing. We played, I would say they were probably 3 5s at the time. And we were doing battle, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, like these guys must be top players, like we're playing so well. And I kind of finished that up, got off the court. Someone asked, oh, are you guys pros? And I was like, all right, if it's my first day and people are already asking me that, this must be a joke of a sport. But little did I know I was nowhere near the pro level. And so that was my first experience. Didn't really touch the paddle for probably 6 months after that. Played again, got a little bit better understanding, got my butt kicked by some 4-0s. And since then, really started to appreciate the nuance of the sport and how different it was from tennis, and have been hooked ever since.
Well, that's an interesting story, especially obviously you are playing at the top level right now. And I think it's probably encouraging, especially from those younger viewers that are getting into it, that you didn't come out of the gate as being great. It took time and patience and I'm sure a lot of dedication in order to get you where you were or where you are now.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think definitely there's a lot of translation from tennis, but what I've been finding now, particularly, I started to really focus on the drilling side, and the mental side is so important. I think you can really get to a certain level from your natural talents and other racket sports background. But what I've been finding now is that talent only gets you so far. Now it's time to hit the books, time to watch the film, time to practice those 1,000 dinks cross court. So when you're in a match and it's game point, it's automatic. So that's kind of, definitely there is an initial jump you can get, but it's a lot of just the dedication and the really honing in on your craft.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you bring up the mental aspect of this, especially because it seems like the schedule is kind of demanding and you are traveling around when you are playing, right? So I'm curious to know, Connor, are you still with us?
Yes.
Oh, there you are. There you are. Sorry, you froze up on me there.
Oh,
Um,
perfect.
so I'm curious to know about the mental aspect and staying fresh, not getting burnt out. What do you do to keep yourself fresh and engaged and kind of amped up and energetic about the game?
Yeah, I that's a really great question. I think for me, that's something that I'm having that internal discussion with myself every tournament, and I'm changing it, iterating. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I got it. And sometimes I'll walk away from a tournament and be like, I did not have the mental side today. So definitely there was a stretch of those 3 tournaments back to back to back where towards the end I was starting to feel a little fried, and everyone has their own way to approach it. And I think for myself, it's just I have to love the game and love the challenge. I can't start thinking I've gotten to a certain level, because once I start that, I get a little bit more negative on the court. I get it, like I have to be so careful of not getting any of that ego. I think for me, I sometimes have a propensity, if I have a good win, I start getting a little confident, and I have to really make sure to check that, because it's such fine margin in pickleball. You have to really just accept that it's anyone can beat anyone and be a student of the game. That's how I try and approach it. But I think some people thrive off the controversy. Some people love it when they are getting into it with their opponents, and that's what fuels them. So knowing your personality and how you play the game is going to be key to approaching that mental side. And I wouldn't say it's a one size fits all by any means.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you're right. When you get to a little bit, when you lose your humbleness and you think that, yeah, I've got this figured out, you forget that you're still learning, and that's when you kind of get yourself down in the middle of the game. No, I do want to point out something. I was watching. This is why I like you so much. Not this is not the only reason, but I was watching a match. You're not on the center court. You're on the side court. There was a team playing to the right of you. I don't know if you remember this or not. I don't know if they're even playing in the tournament or not, or just hitting the balls.
Mm-hmm.
So you were getting a little frustrated, visibly frustrated, but still their ball rolled over to you. Not you walked over and hit it back to them, despite being trying to be in the zone, trying not to be frustrated. You went out of your way to help them. That really stuck out for me. Do you recall that by any chance? You probably not. It was just a one random thing, but
Yeah, I'm trying to think what court I would have been on, but
yeah,
no, I mean, I think one of the important things that in pickleball, like I've noticed people starting to think like, oh, like I'm a big deal. I mean, in this sport, I've been playing for 8 months and doing decently well. Like,
yeah,
you can't start thinking you're too big of a deal. I
right.
mean, everyone out there, it's just pickleball. I'm sure people say that, like you can say that about most things, but at least with pickleball, it's still a newer sport.
Yeah.
And it's just it I don't know a better way to say it besides it's just pickleball, and you got to be able to separate that in the moment with how you want to conduct yourself outwardly to other people. And that's something that's so important, because at least for me, I think your on court demeanor says a lot about who you are, and it brings out your true character. A lot of people say like, oh, let's separate it, but no, when you really want to win, that's who you are the most. And so trying to have that, obviously you can get upset and you can get pumped, but it's trying to do it in a respectful way and make sure that everyone around you feels that. And I've definitely messed up a few times. I can remember in tennis as well, where I've gotten some warnings from refs, but doing that more than not is something that I find super important.
Yeah, and I think, reason why I bring that up is because those little things make a really big difference. So I'm sure not just myself, other viewers were seeing you did that. And it just reemphasizes the beauty of the pickleball community. I've never seen a community so supportive of each other. It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very
Um,
different from tennis in that regard. Tennis, you see a little bit more. It's a more singles focused event too, which is kind of interesting. I wonder if that's part of it. I also think the way pickleball got formed, with people just having fun on the court, you're able to talk, and it's more of a friendly environment at the amateur level and just rec play. So that probably also helps out the just overall niceness and integrity of the sport.
yeah, there was, I obviously we haven't seen too many incidents, and I'm sorry, I'm deviating a little bit from the questions I sent you.
No
But
worries.
since we're going down this path, I think that to your point, I think some players do like to be a little bit more energetic, call out the opponents, wag their fingers, or whatever they do to inspire them to play their best. But I think that overall, I think we've seen a good temperament. So I wanted the Minnesota event. I'm not sure if you saw this or heard about it, but DJ Young slammed his paddle and almost hit actually one in the crowd. Um, we don't want to see that. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Did that surprise you at all, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. In that type of an event, there's frustration, and I can empathize with DJ doing that. I also think the paddle took an unfortunate bounce.
Right.
Like, there's one thing where if he's throwing it into the crowd, he just smacked it down and it bounced there. Obviously, anything going in the crowd is a serious kind of issue, but it's more you look at the intent of that. And I'm guessing DJ's probably from that now is going to be a little bit more careful with how he handles that. And I don't think the actual outburst, like showing that emotion, is bad. I
Yeah.
just think you got to be aware of what could happen in some of those things. Like if he smashes paddle on the net, I think with the same aggressiveness, I think that's 100% fine. I think just having that and being a little bit aware of that. So it's a little bit of an unfortunate event all around, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, Davice did the same thing. She slammed her paddle down, but that it didn't travel anywhere. So I think 99 out of 100 times that paddle when he throws it like that goes into the net.
Yeah.
And I think you make a really good point. It was not intentional to throw into the stands at all.
Yeah.
So I was just curious what your thoughts on that were. But getting back to the questions, so when you're not playing pickleball, what do you enjoy doing?
Yeah. I like doing a lot of things. I mean, I moved down to Orange County, so the beach definitely is up there. I don't get there as much as I'd like, but that's definitely something. I just love being outdoors. I grew up hiking all the time, so being in nature is something that's really awesome, and just disconnecting. With pickleball, it's kind of been interesting. There's definitely an influx of social media attention that I have found. If I have a good result, you tend to get a lot of messages and you tend to get some love. And it's good and bad, where you kind of bit of extra dopamine that a little bit of almost a come down after the tournament if you have a really good result. And so just being out, disconnecting is something that I try and do. Now that I'm full-time pickleball, I'm starting to be a little bit more methodical with my days.
Yeah.
And that is something that I'm trying to integrate. I haven't really gotten it fully set up because I've been traveling quite a bit, but this week is kind of the guinea pig week of let me get my schedule, let me prioritize those days of downtime, seeing friends, making sure that pickleball is in my life. I don't think anything, regardless of what you're doing, whether it's you're making millions in the NFL or you're making a couple bucks here and there on the pickleball tour, you got to still have that balance. I think that's so important.
Yeah, for your mental health, it's very important. And having good people around you. So I'm sure you have great people around you to keep you grounded and steer you away from making any bad decisions that are out there. And you mentioned that you're full-time pickleball. Does that mean that your investment banking career is over?
So I am still dabbling in the financial world.
Okay.
I am pursuing a few opportunities in IB and wealth management on the smaller scale. That's a little bit more part-time. That I think for me, it's important to be challenged in those regards mentally. Pickleball is its own mental challenge, but there's just a different mental side that I enjoy doing. And one of my mentors, he from Santa Clara, he always would say that you got to make sure all your buckets are filled. And so just being aware of what you need in your life And so I think if I just played pickleball, I would start to become a little bit more negative on the pickleball court. And that's one thing that I really want to avoid. And I want to be enjoying it when I'm out there. And it's obviously going to be tough at times. And there are times where I'm going to hate it. And I can think of a few. And there are times where I love it. But having that 75% of the time where you're just enjoying the sport.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's probably maybe little less pressure too, that you do have something else going on at the same time. So the next question is, you won, as I mentioned in the intro, you won the 2016-2017 WCC Men's Sportsmanship Award where you were playing at Santa Clara. I did actually watch that acceptance interview, and it was really based on your overall integrity and, interesting enough, line calling. You called your own lines. Coincidentally, you must line call in pickleball, even at the highest, the pro ranks. Was the transition from calling your own lines in tennis translate well to calling your own lines in pickleball?
It does not.
Oh, really?
In tennis, I felt like I had like 95% confidence in my line calls, and I would err on that, and I knew that, so I'd give a little extra, that 5%, just to uh keep it fair. But in
Yeah.
pickleball, with the way the ball compresses, it's a little tougher to see those lines. So just when you're playing, especially I'd say singles, because it's such fine margins, it's a
Yeah.
little bit tougher. And I would say 95% of the time I can think of maybe one or two incidences where someone's questioned me. I would say I probably err on the side of giving those calls, but it's definitely tougher to see those lines just with the way the ball compresses and how you're looking at the ball as well.
I talked to you offline about this when you were playing Ryan Sherry and he hit one down the line and
Mhm.
he wasn't excited about that, so he walked over to you and I was like, oh my god, Connor, run. But it sounds like, I obviously, I don't think you're going to be running into many of those types of confrontations. I think that you're doing your best. And well, with that being said, as pickleball grows, as the payouts become larger, at the professional level, who knows where pickleball is going to be, right? But let's just say it does blow up from a financial perspective, and those line calls mean a little bit more because it could be difference between a big purse. Do you see that we'll see a replacement of players calling their own lines to be replaced by line judges, or even technology making the calls?
I think it has to be. I think
Oh,
that, just like I actually had this, I was thinking about this the other day. Uh it might have been that incident that spurred it, but
right.
just in general with other sports like tennis, those top pro guys, I knew some of them growing up, and I had buddies that would make like that knew other ones, and you knew in the juniors some were bad line callers, but
Right.
having that taken away really makes the talent shine. It just allows the sport to be played more purely, and it takes emotion out of the line calls. Someone could genuinely just get super excited and want to win so badly that they make a bad call. And I don't think that's the majority of calls, but just a hypothetical to give people the benefit of the doubt. Also, there are just some egregious calls that people will make that aren't for those reasons. But I think taking that out makes the game a little bit more pure and lets the pickleball itself do the talking and really gets it to all those other sports. Because what other sport at the top level do you call? Do you have any impact on the game by what you're calling on your opponent?
Yeah, I just think it's such a conflict of interest for a
Yeah,
player calling their own lines at this. Again, rec play, I go play a rec, cool. We can call lines all day. There's nothing at stake here. But again, I think when you really introduce the purses and even players getting picked at the MLP level. I mean, those decisions could really sway people's perception of you. And I won't mention any names, but there are players out there who have notoriously been bad line callers. And we hope that everyone is doing the best they can, but again, why even put it in the player's hands to begin with? It's just do it. I would love to see technology. You have, like, I think it's like the Hawkeye
Hawkeye.
in tennis. I know that's not the same thing, but kind of is. But I would like to see, me personally, I would like to see pickleball leapfrog the people line judge aspect and go right to technology. I think that will kind of leapfrog the sport into the new century. But
Yeah, no, I completely agree. In tennis, I want to say like 1 or 2 years ago, now they have all the line calls being electronically done. So it takes
oh, they
out like
do. Oh,
the Hawkeye system. So
oh, okay.
they actually, it's kind of funny. They voice recorded a line judge saying out. And so it sounds like just normal line judges, but if you look, there it's just technology now. And so it makes the game a little bit more unbiased. Obviously, I've heard from some people that there are some crazy calls, but
Yeah,
the takeaway from it is it's technology. It's not like technology has a preference on who wins. It's just it
exactly.
might make some mistakes, but it's going to even out in the long term. So something like that would be amazing for pickleball to have going forward. And obviously, it's a new sport, so they had at MLP they had the replay, which was pretty cool. And so
Yeah.
having those things, I imagine just it's going to continue to get better and better. And I'm excited to see. Hopefully, we have something in the form of technology to call lines here in the next year or so.
That makes a lot of sense. I think even Major League Baseball toyed around with the idea of having
Mhm.
technology call balls and strikes, um, which they kind of already do if you're watching the game on TV. They actually already does that. But I think it's one of those things where you may have old school people who want to keep the integrity of the game, don't change the game, and I think you have to kind of, um, whoever's making the decision has to weigh that as well. Um, what changes, maybe we just talked about one, right? But what changes would you like to see in tournament play, either on the PPA or the MLP? What's something that you think that could really evolve and bring the game to the next level?
Yeah, I think with the MLP, they've been doing a great job and it's pretty early on. And so figuring out the draft going forward, I'm really excited to see what they're going to do in 2024. It's kind of crazy to say 2024 already. But excited to see what they do with that year, obviously, with the different Premier and Challenger. They had to cater to that this year. So they've handled that well. But having it a little bit more somehow this was just like a crazy idea and I don't and probably you could pick this apart and it wouldn't work, but having players traded and it's
Oh,
like I'm trying to think. So in fantasy football, we
yeah.
did this. There's like the snake draft, which is kind of how MLP is done, and then there's an auction draft. And so having an auction draft where you pay for players and then another team can buy that player and let's say you pick up me for like $20 and I have a really good showing, and so now all of a sudden the team is willing to pick me up for $40, then somehow maybe me and that prior team split the delta of that 40 over 20. So that extra 20, maybe 10 goes to that team and 10 goes to me. So they get rewarded for a pick. And there's that incentive because right now, if you have Ben and me, no one's making the trade for me. But if there's you think you can get a value deal, then that's where it becomes a little bit more crafty and there's a little bit more skill involved with the drafting, and it starts feeling like some of those other sports.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea because obviously MLP is newer for sure, but
Mhm.
it's so exciting. Everyone I talk to loves the team aspect of it. It's really great, and I think as the game evolves and it becomes a little bit more audience friendly and fun, I think that's probably something you want to see. Now, I don't know if they have. You mentioned fantasy football. I don't know if they have fantasy pickleball yet. I don't know. Do they? I don't think
I don't
so.
think they do. I think the DraftKings is something that uh, could potentially be in the next big thing. I know that's
Yeah.
pretty exciting that they're working on there. So
Oh yeah.
who knows? Maybe there will be fantasy pickleball soon.
Well, we got to put our money on Connor Garnett. That's for sure. So when did you said you mentioned when you started like 8 months ago. I mean, and you're already again playing at the highest levels against the best people in the world. But when did you stop and say to yourself, "Yeah, I'm good enough to play at the pro level"? Is there like a moment, or how did you make that determination?
I think in singles, I kind of had a hunch that I would be able to hang from the beginning. In doubles, I mean, I play against 5-0s after tournaments and get beaten. And so I I feel like with pickleball, it's a little different than other sports where there's never that security of, oh, I can make it. I knew I was when I started, there was a good buzz around me at my local club. So I was optimistic, but I kept my day job for a pretty long time until I actually signed with the PPA and had other people kind of put their money where their mouth was on me. So I wouldn't say there was ever a time where I felt secure. It's just kind of been taking it one step at a time, especially on the double side and seeing where I can go. And I've been doing well so far. So who knows? Every tournament, those same doubts and just keeping it rolling and seeing what can happen.
If you didn't play tennis, do you think that you would have progressed as quickly as you have in pickleball?
No, I think there are certain innate qualities that you need to be successful from tennis to pickleball, but I like having whether it's a tennis, probably racquetball, badminton, some of these are definitely going to be accelerators. You have to get a certain level of technique down with thousands of reps. So my drive in pickleball is a tennis drive. I've had thousands of reps of that. Obviously, there's a little bit of a difference. And so that's what I'm fine tuning. But I have a baseline confidence from tennis that allows me to get to a certain level with that is years in the making. So you need some form of that. And that's why you see some of these pickleball, like non tennis players, have success
Yeah.
more recently and have been playing for a while. So it's getting those skills, getting those reps. And it's obviously you're going to start off a lot quicker regardless. And then tennis kind of just helps leapfrog you up to that level where now I'm kind of hitting that plateau where I've used all my tennis ability. And now I can either get serious and figure out how to play pickleball properly or just kind of plateau and watch the new guys come in and outshine me.
Yeah, it's definitely a learning curve, and it's just you just got to play it to really experience it and get better. And
Mm-hmm.
like you said, watch a video, do your homework, and obviously you have a killer two-handed backhand, which is awesome. What is your favorite shot? Is it the forehand or the backhand? Do you prefer?
I like the backhand speed up. I
Okay.
when I'm at the kitchen, speeding that up. I'm trying to go all different which ways with it and just hitting that or a swing volley on the backhand that's
Yeah.
sitting a little higher. Just I feel like there was a video of me in I want to say Houston last year at the APP where Kai and I were playing Deckel and DJ,
Yeah.
and we were down decently bad in the second, and I just ripped a backhand, and I would say that shot, I don't get it a lot anymore because people know not to do it, but that shot I feel like is one of the shots I can hit harder than most anyone out there.
Yeah. So how often do you actually like per week? How often do you practice, and what is your routine?
Yeah, that's a good question. It fluctuates. I'm starting to get a little bit more dialed with that. Today I played for 4 or 5 hours, which was great. But before this, it's kind of whenever I can finesse onto the court. And I just recently, it was right before MLP Mesa that I quit my job. So having the freedom, I was in Arizona for 2 weeks for that. So I wasn't having a strong practice schedule. But the ultimate goal is to get probably a good hour and a half of singles, good hour and a half of doubles drilling, and then play some points per day, and then taking 2 days off. So like a Friday and a Sunday off, just to make sure that mentally I'm still enjoying the sport. But obviously there are going to be a lot of weekends with tournaments. So finding that balance and really drilling when there's downtime and then competing more when there are tournaments, that's going to be the next step that I'm still figuring out to make sure that I'm mentally ready for the tournaments and then have done my prep the week before with the drilling to match that.
That makes sense. So I had this question, I took it out, but I'm gonna put it back in. I'm remiss not to ask you, okay, about the Ben Johns matchup. I forget what tournament it was, but you was very close. You lost 12-10, 12-10, I believe. How much
Yeah.
how about yes, thank you. How much confidence, especially it was a little bit earlier on, how much confidence did you come out of that knowing you almost beat the best player in the world? Did that bring a little bit of confidence boost to you as well to kind of help from the mental perspective?
Yeah, that's funny. I think I'm different in most ways with other cool or with other just like with like how I think about the sport. And so most people probably would be like, "Oh yeah, of course." Like that really solidified their thinking. But for me, I remember the things that caused me to lose the match. And
Right.
so it actually just made me more fired up on the drilling court. And I try and not think about where I'm at or if I've made it or not. I just try and control the things I can control, especially in singles. It's such fine margins that regardless, I can have that tournament and then I can go 0-2 the next week. So it's just trying to get confidence in your strokes and not look too far ahead or think too much of your actual results. But definitely it was cool watching it back, and it was awesome to see, and I got a lot of love from friends and family about that match, and it definitely helped solidify in their mind that I was making a good choice when I made the jump over into pickleball, and so they were a little more understanding. So I'll give some credit for that for sure.
Yeah, I could see them being, yeah, Connor, you go play pickleball, you'll be fine. And they see like, oh, okay, maybe this guy does is pretty good.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a tricky thing because obviously I had a good job that I really enjoyed. So with the family, at first they're like, wait, scratching their heads like this sport that doesn't pay a lot of money, like what are you doing? But they saw how passionate I was in it, and they were very supportive ultimately. But definitely a little bit different of a route.
Yeah, well, that's super cool. I mean, it's obviously, I think when people see you out there, they just think, oh, Connor Garnett's out there, but it's not. It's your friends, your family, it's your support systems, the people that are behind you. It's very important to your success, I'm sure. So what is the process to choose a partner in both men's or mixed doubles? And why do you think some partnerships change over time?
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's a ground, especially now that a little more money is coming into it. Everyone's trying to find that partner that's going to be right for them, and it can get a little bit uh, cutthroat as well. So you are just trying to reach out, and I think it's important to find someone that you can trust and that you think is going to be a good long-term partner for you. It's obviously going to change with different people's mentalities and just how you handle the game. I think I'm someone that's more positive, so I need someone that's a little bit upbeat and and I'm able to talk to during those points. So it really is a trial and error period, especially for the newer people in the game. You're trying to figure out who's that partner that maybe they're not as good as another player, but you mesh better with them or you've been training with them. There's definitely a benefit to playing with someone that you've been training with a lot. Also, if you're training a lot of then a person is probably not going to leave you for someone else because you're going to have to see him every day. So having those kind of people who see potential, it goes a long way for a partner.
Yeah, I see, with Lee Waters being out, I see, various or Leah Jansen, Catherine Porento, Anna Bright kind of partnering with Anna Lee Waters. And it must be awkward leaving your partner to go play with her. I don't know, it just seems like an awkward thing. So I'm not gonna play with you because I'm gonna be playing with her now.
I it's interesting because there's two kind of schools of thought with how you want to approach it. Just get the best partner and have the best result. And I mean, I think Anna Lee has won all of the
Yeah.
doubles titles. So I mean, shoot, if you get an opportunity like that, like it's tough to say no. But there's also, can I play? Can I find someone that I can play a season with and do well and have deep runs?
Yeah.
And so it's just different situations, and I don't know what I would choose in that situation. I mean,
Right.
it's pretty nice to win a medal. Like it's
Yeah.
tough to say like sit here and be like, oh no, I'm gonna find a partner that I can stay with for the year. When case in point, they're getting medals when they play with her. So
Yeah.
it's definitely very very difficult, the partner situation, and you don't want to step on any toes, but you also got to make the best decision for yourself as well. And that's I mean that's a perfect example of where it comes down to who you are as a person. It's how
Yeah.
you
Right.
handle those situations is just as important as how you handle yourself on the court, and whether you're making the decision that you feel is fair and right. And everyone's going to have a different position on that. And I think they're like, you can have a position that maybe offends a few people, but if you feel like you handled it the right way, then more power to you. And so there's obviously a gray area with a lot of that stuff, and it's very tricky. Just have to kind of handle it the way that's right with you and what other people are going to think they're going to think.
Yeah, I mean you're right. I think you have to be put in a situation as well. I think if Ben or Anna Lee calls you on the phone tomorrow and says, "Hey Connor, guess what? I want you to be my partner." It's something to consider, I guess. But to your point, who do you want to be for the long term, and what do you want to represent? And I'm sure it's a difficult decision no matter what. Um, I do want to move into the final segment real quick here, Connor. What do you think are three pickleball tips that you think could help our viewers, especially let's say they're intermediate players?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm teaching, the thing that I try and focus on the most is the kinetic chain. A lot of times with pickleball, people are using a lot of their upper body, And so being able to have good footwork to get yourself into position, you want your upper body to be pretty silent and let your legs and hips and then ultimately your arm and wrist do the work. But you don't want to have these crazy movements because it just adds more unpredictability into your game. So the more you can develop that consistent shot,
Yeah.
that's going to be the most important thing. And it comes from that lower body. So I would say there's a ton of nuances in that, but that's really the key thing to think about. And then obviously dinking technique with your wrist and stuff like that is important. But I would say really that is the thing to focus on first before you start adding on to.